You ever have one of those days where you're just trying to get your work done and someone decides to make it all about them? Yeah, that was me last Saturday. I live on a small farm just outside a suburban HOA neighborhood, close enough that I've seen my fair share of entitled behavior, but this one really took the cake. I was heading out early in the morning to plow one of the backfields with my tractor. It was routine work, nothing fancy. But when I rolled up to the end of my driveway, there it was, some shiny little compact car parked right in front of the tractor path, completely blocking my way out. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone's guest parked there by accident. But after a couple knocks on doors and a few awkward conversations, I realized exactly who it belonged to: Karen. Yep, that Karen, the self-declared queen of the HOA. She's the kind of neighbor who reports you to the board if your grass is half an inch too long, or if your American flag isn't properly mounted. And now, without any permission, she'd parked her car smack in front of my tractor route. Because, according to her, this road should be private and farmers should use the back way. Spoiler alert, there is no back way. I tried being reasonable. I tried waiting. I even left a polite note. But hours passed, and she made it clear she wasn't going to move it. That's when I decided if she wanted to park on a farm, she was going to get the full farm experience. So I climbed into my tractor, shifted into gear, and well, let's just say what happened next had the entire neighborhood peeking through their curtains. But that's where things really started to spiral. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I just wanted to get to work. The sun was already high, and every minute wasted meant more time in the heat later. But the thing with Karen is, she doesn't see beyond her own little bubble. She'd always acted like the HOA extended beyond its borders, like my land was some kind of extension of her authority. I'd seen her scolding delivery drivers, quit calling the city over someone's mailbox paint, even once arguing with the local wildlife rescue folks because their van looked too beat up for her neighborhood. But this was different. She had deliberately parked her car across a clearly marked farm access road, not on the side, not temporarily. She had parked in the dead center, popped out with her little dog, and walked off like she owned the place. And I know it wasn't random either. The week before, we'd had a minor argument about the dust from my plowing drifting toward her pristine white porch. I had offered to adjust the timing of my work, but apparently that wasn't enough. She wanted me to stop altogether. I thought it was over until she parked her car there. Neighbors started to whisper. A few folks walking their dogs paused to look at me as I sat there, arms crossed in my tractor, engine humming low. One guy even gave me a thumbs up, clearly understanding what kind of neighbor I was dealing with. But the weirdest part, Karen still hadn't come out. It was like she'd vanished. No apology, no explanation, nothing. Just her car, baking in the sun, blocking my path. And that's when I noticed something else that didn't sit right. Something in the backseat of her car that made me hesitate. Before taking the next step, I leaned out from the tractor seat and squinted at the back window of Karen's car. There was something in there, pressed against the glass. At first, I thought it might be a jacket or one of those weird backseat organizers. But no, it was a stack of official-looking papers and a sealed envelope with some kind of county stamp. Now, I'm not usually the nosy type, but when someone parks on my land and disappears without warning, and then leaves government-looking paperwork in plain view, well, my gut started to twist a bit. I climbed down and walked slowly toward the car, careful not to touch anything. The envelope had the words "Property Violation Final Notice" stamped in red across the top. That's when things got even more interesting. It wasn't addressed to me but to Karen, and it wasn't from the HOA. It was from the county land office. Apparently, she'd been warned about something serious, maybe her renovations. Maybe her fences that mysteriously got taller last year. Or maybe all those surveillance cameras she had mounted that faced everyone but her own home. I didn't have time to sort all that out. But now, the situation wasn't just about a blocked path. Something was going on behind the scenes, and Karen was clearly trying to hide it. Maybe that's why she parked here, to draw attention away from her own mess by making trouble for someone else. Typical entitled behavior, just taken up a notch. But still, where was she? Meanwhile, more neighbors started showing up. First, old Mr. Higgins from 2 houses down. Then a couple from the next block who'd had their own run-ins with Karen over lawn decorations. They weren't just curious, they looked concerned. Some even whispered that they hadn't seen her at all since the day before. And just as I was thinking that, someone pointed to the woods behind my field. "Hey, ... isn't that her dog?" they said. And sure enough, there it was, leash still dragging, barking toward the trees like it was trying to lead someone somewhere. The dog's barking echoed through the quiet fields, breaking the stillness like a warning. Everyone's eyes turned toward the edge of the trees where the noise was coming from. I could feel the tension rising, not just in me, but in the crowd that had gathered around Karen's car, still blocking my tractor's path. It was like the whole neighborhood held its breath, waiting for what was about to happen next. I climbed back onto the tractor, trying to stay calm, but my mind was racing. What was Karen hiding? Why was her dog loose out here, like she'd disappeared, without a trace? The papers in the car suggested some kind of serious trouble, but nothing prepared me for the way this was spiraling. I glanced around and saw a few neighbors pulling out their phones, ready to call for help or maybe just capture everything on video. Social media would eat this up, entitled HOA Karen causing a scene by blocking a farmer's work. Then, mysteriously vanishing just then, I spotted movement near the tree line, a flash of bright clothing. Someone was coming out of the woods, moving quickly but carefully, like they didn't want to be seen. My heart pounded as I recognized the figure. It was Karen. She wasn't angry or defensive like I expected. Instead, she looked ... worried. An entirely different side than the one who so confidently parked her car in front of my tractor. She held something in her hands. Something I couldn't quite make out from a distance. The dog bounded up to her, tail wagging wildly, but Karen's face stayed serious. She didn't say a word as she stepped closer to the car. Then, without warning, she opened the driver's side door, and suddenly, everything changed. The neighbors held their breath, and I gripped the tractor's steering wheel tighter, knowing that whatever came next would decide the entire outcome of this standoff. But before I could react, Karen did something no one saw coming, something that threw the entire neighborhood into chaos. Just as Karen swung open the driver's door, I expected her to move the car or at least say something. Instead, she pulled out a thick envelope, the same kind I'd seen through the window, and waved it in the air like a weapon. "You don't understand," she said, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't just about parking or dust. I've been fighting this for months. They're trying to take my land." The crowd around us exchanged puzzled looks. Suddenly, the whole story felt bigger than a simple neighbor dispute. Karen wasn't just the typical entitled HOA member. She was caught up in something that threatened her in ways none of us had guessed. She went on to explain between shaky breaths that the county had filed a claim, saying part of her property overlapped with the farmland. If they enforced it, she'd lose a chunk of land she'd poured years into fixing up, and the legal fees were piling up fast. I could see the stress etched into her face, but still, blocking my tractor like that. That was a dangerous game. "Why park here then? Why block my work?" I asked. She hesitated before admitting she was desperate, hoping to force a meeting with me and other neighbors to rally support against the county's claim. But then came the twist no one saw coming. As Karen stepped back from the car, A police cruiser appeared at the end of the lane, sirens off but flashing lights glowing. Someone must have called the cops, probably one of the neighbors filming everything on their phone. Karen's expression shifted from frustration to panic. The officers didn't approach immediately. Instead, they spoke quietly into their radios and glanced at the papers Karen still clutched. The tension exploded. Now it wasn't just about a car blocking a tractor or an HOA squabble. It was about legal battles, possible trespassing claims, and a standoff that could blow up in everyone's face. I gripped the tractor handles harder, knowing the next moments would change everything, and no one was ready for how deep this mess really went. The officers finally stepped forward, their serious faces cutting through the thick tension. One of them approached Karen and asked to see the papers again. As she handed them over, I overheard the officer mention something about a boundary dispute and possible unauthorized use of farmland. The weight of the situation hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just a petty HOA feud. It was a real legal mess involving land rights that affected more than just us. Then the officer turned to me and asked if I was the owner of the tractor and the farmland. I nodded. He explained that the county had received complaints from both sides and that until things got sorted out, no one was allowed to block access or interfere with farming operations. Karen's car had to be moved immediately. That's when Karen's expression shifted from panic to defiance. "I won't move until this is resolved," she said firmly, clutching her papers. I could tell she felt backed into a corner, desperate to hold on to what she thought was hers, but the officer made it clear. Blocking the tractor was illegal, and if she refused, they'd have to tow the vehicle and possibly issue citations. Seeing the escalating tension, I decided to step in. I suggested we all sit down and talk with the county officials to figure out the property lines and settle the dispute before it got worse. Karen hesitated, but eventually agreed, realizing the stubborn standoff wasn't helping anyone. Just as we were about to leave the field, a low rumble caught everyone's attention. From the edge of the trees, a rusty old truck emerged, the kind you don't see much anymore. Out stepped a man in his 60s, weathered and calm, holding what looked like a faded map. "I'm the previous owner of this land," he said quietly, "and there's something you all need to see before making any decisions." The crowd fell silent, the mystery deepening once more. What secrets did that old map hold? And how would it change everything we thought we knew about this fight? The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. The man laid out the faded map on the hood of his truck, and everyone gathered around, squinting at the old, hand-drawn lines. It turned out the county's official records had a mistake part of. The land they claimed Karen was fighting over actually belonged to my farmland. The previous owner had kept the map hidden for years, waiting for the right time to settle the dispute. Suddenly, everything shifted from a neighborhood standoff to a shared problem that needed cooperation, not conflict. Karen's tension eased as she saw the truth in the map. I could tell she realized how her stubbornness had almost cost her not just the land, but the respect of the neighbors. The officers took notes, promising to get the county's surveyors involved immediately to correct the records. That meant the legal battle would be resolved soon, and my tractor path would be clear again without any drama. In the end, Karen agreed to move her car and apologized for blocking the access, acknowledging the frustration we'd both been feeling. We even talked about ways to avoid problems in the future, setting clear boundaries and communicating better. The neighbors who'd gathered slowly dispersed, some still chatting about how intense the whole situation had become. This experience taught me a lot about patience and understanding. Sometimes what seems like just a simple parking dispute is actually tied to deeper issues, and jumping to conclusions only makes things worse. It also reminded me that even the most entitled behavior can come from a place of fear or stress, and showing a little empathy can open the door to solutions. So, If you ever find yourself in a conflict with a neighbor, remember this story. Listen carefully, stand your ground calmly, and look for the bigger picture. Because sometimes the real problem isn't the parking spot, it's the history behind it. And that's how a blocked tractor path turned into a lesson on community and cooperation.